let's take a look at the third pillar of Ucommerce 9.4, and that is scalability. The idea here, as you know, performance is a feature of e-commerce. How fast you're able to convert a customer makes a real difference between making a sale or not. And so with Ucommerce 9.0, we shipped a new technology called Bolt, which is the new commerce API of Ucommerce, which was designed to deliver super snappy and fast results to customers by basically taking all the flexible information within the e-commerce platform, indexing it to a search engine, and then making it available for the website. Now, we showed you really quick load times and things like that back in April of last year. And the solution here was based on Lucine, which is a great option for rolling out simply with zero-touch deployment. It's just a file on a file system. Lucine works, and it's super easy to leverage. However, the challenge with the existing provider based on Lucine is that it only works on one machine, and so it does not offer really any form of scalability when you want to scale out across multiple servers and thus service a higher load of customers. So with Ucommerce 9.4, we're introducing a new provider for Bolt, which works in addition to the Lucine provider, which is based on Elasticsearch. Elasticsearch is a industry standard search engine which provides enterprise search capabilities, as well as the ability to run on multiple servers, and thus enabling you to scale across many instances for your e-commerce solution. It has the added benefit of enabling you to scale independently of whatever CMS you're running in. So the benefit of that is that for Umbraco, for example, if you're hosting a website on Umbraco Cloud, it doesn't have any inherent capability to run on multiple boxes in that particular mode. So you would be limited to one box. But with Ucommerce 9.4 and the Elasticsearch provider, you will now be able to scale out of band from Umbraco Cloud, so you can actually have multiple instances supporting your e-commerce portion of your website and have Umbraco work on Umbraco Cloud like you're used to. For a CMS like Sitecore, it means that we're no longer scaling, we're no longer requiring additional Sitecore licenses to scale with Sitecore. So you can actually scale without purchasing additional Sitecore licenses, which significantly reduce cost on the Sitecore license side. And for Sitefinity, it means that we're working within their cloud environments and for their multi-scaling as well, no problem. And best of all, Elasticsearch is what we call opt-in complexity. So you do not have to use it until you need it. With just a reconfiguration of your website, you can switch over from Lucine to Elasticsearch. Your queries will continue to work. No code changes no code changes required. Once you switch over, you reindex and you're able to run on top of the new search engine. And when you need it, you can scale out to multiple boxes to basically get to where you need to go. And Elasticsearch offers multiple different ways of doing this. And David will talk more about that in a moment. So that's Elasticsearch, and here to show off Elasticsearch and talk a little bit more in detail about what it does and how it works is David Killerman, Senior Software Developer here at Ucommerce. Over to you, David.
Thank you. So let's see if technology agrees and I can share my screen. And hopefully you are seeing my presentation. So yes, my name is David, and we're going to talk a bit about this new integration with Elasticsearch. And let's get straight into it. So first of all, I'm going to cover sort of similar to Esben, what is Bolt, a bit of a recap on what is the point of this project that we call Bolt. Then I'm going to move on to talking about the main goals for us as to why did we even begin working on this in the first place. And of course, what are the benefits for you as a partner or as a customer of Ucommerce. Then I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about the performance of the provider. And I'm going to close off with a few notable features that I thought were going to be worth mentioning here today. So what is Project Bolt and what was the idea behind it? It was to provide a unified and revised API layer for surfacing data to the customer. So to get product information on your website available, and the keyword here is being fast, as well as in many different ways, be that your product listing on your website or your search capabilities. To take this one step further, of course, this is done by, among other things, by introducing modern technologies underneath the hood. So that's in short what Bolt wants to cover. So let's get down into the details and specifically about Elasticsearch. So first I will cover what our main goals were with the implementation, and hopefully cover when and why should you use this provider over its alternative. The first and probably the main driving force behind this integration was scalability. As Sarah mentioned before, with the Lucine provider, those who run on multiple Ucommerce servers or multiple website servers are not really being tooled correctly. It's not really going to work out with the Lucine provider. So we knew we needed an alternative, and Elasticsearch is that alternative to that. Apart from that, there is a different scaling option that I thought was worth mentioning, which was if your website is particularly search heavy or important promotions are coming up, then the Elasticsearch provider makes it possible so that you can scale your search, the Elasticsearch server, independently from even your Ucommerce server. So even if you are running Ucommerce on a singular server, it might be worth looking into using Elasticsearch. And the third point here is, even though it's not directly related to scalability, I thought I would mention the cloud tooling, because there are a lot of great tools that come with using Elasticsearch as an underlying technology, which you might be interested in if you are taking your web shop to that next level of when you are actually monitoring and analyzing your traffic. You're backing up your indexes, different deployment regions, etc., etc. So take these with a grain of salt, but I try to draft up a few rules of thumb as to when would you use Elasticsearch provider versus the Lucine provider. And what we can see is that upwards towards and above 100,000 products, the Elasticsearch provider becomes far more performant than the Lucine provider. Of course, this will widely depend on the configuration of your data. Many products, few products, how much information do you store on those products? But this is just a rule of thumb that you might follow. Of course, if you are running a multi-server setup, it's pretty much a given that you're going to be using the Elasticsearch provider. And of course, if you have a technical preference for the tooling, or if you or one of your developers just loves working with Elasticsearch, I think that's also a pretty good reason to pick this over the alternative. So to move on, the other main goal, and I only have two of these, was the easy setup, the ease of setup for you to be able to switch from one provider to the other. And we tried to make this as simple as possible by using the Ucommerce app. So if you've been around with Ucommerce prior to version 9 or version 9, you will have an idea of what this means, but I will also show it here in a second. Another point to this is transparent and flexible configuration. So one of the terms that we use a lot when talking about this provider is opt-in complexity. It means that if you want to use this, you can opt in, but of course, because of its power, it comes with some responsibility. It comes with some configuration necessary on your part. And what this means is that we wanted Ucommerce to get in your way as little as possible when you're configuring your Elasticsearch server. So we didn't want to abstract any of the options away. And what this means in broad strokes is that, for example, if you have developers who have previously connected .NET applications to Elasticsearch, they will have a pretty good idea of what needs to be done here in order to have Ucommerce work with Elasticsearch as well. And of course, we provide the default setup to match the default setup of Elasticsearch itself if you need to get up fast and, for example, for a customer demo or a user acceptance test or something similar. The important bit here is that you can toggle between these two providers easily and without having to make changes to your code. And this is one of the crucial points for us. So next up, I'm going to try to see if I can learn a new way a live demo can go wrong. Hopefully, you can see my browser here, and I have the new and shiny Avenue Clothing 2 running on my local instance here. And all this data, all these products, the category navigation in the top, the search is powered by Lucine. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go to my file explorer, and I'm going to go ahead and disable the Lucine provider, and I'm simply going to enable the Elasticsearch provider. I'm going to, of course, restart my application pool as part of this. And then I'm going to log into the administration interface of Ucommerce. And I'm going to index everything from scratch. Now, this is, of course, necessary because all my data is currently residing on the file system in Lucine. I need to get that data into Elasticsearch somehow. And this is done by indexing everything. So now, if I refresh my Umbraco 8 site here, instantly, all this new information is now coming from my Elasticsearch cluster, be that locally, be that hosted in the cloud, be that across multiple instances. And you have access to all the information that you have otherwise, all the powerful features of faceted search, full text search, suggestions. Right. So that was my short little demo for today. I'm going to move on to performance. So I mentioned before, performance is a feature, and I wanted to highlight what changes in performance can you expect when moving from the Lucine provider to the Elasticsearch provider, because there are differences. What I'm not covering here is a performance comparison with pre-version 9 Ucommerce speeds, but hopefully the numbers speak for themselves enough that you can sort of make that comparison, even if not accurately, but I hope you'll see how fast this actually is. So first off, I'm going to cover the indexing performance, and this is what we call the non-critical performance of the application. This is the act of preparing all your data so that it can be searched by many, many customers over and over as fast as possible. So this is where we actually usually prefer to take a performance hit over when actually searching. And what we can see in general, and take these performance charts with a grain of salt, because again, it depends, and it might even change version to version as we improve in the future. But what we see is that indexing with the Elasticsearch provider actually is considerably faster than indexing with the Lucine provider. So in the time that it takes the new provider to index 10,000 products, that's how much time it takes Lucine to index 1,000 products. Now, the critical performance, the search performance, is a little more cloudy than that. This is the performance that is actually getting data, getting products ready to be displayed for your customers. This is where it's really important for things to be fast. And that's why we're talking in milliseconds here. So what we notice from our testing is that similar or better performance is actually achieved with the Elasticsearch provider. The more you scale upwards in terms of amount of data, the more the Elasticsearch provider and underlying technology starts to shine more and more. So at this point, you might be asking, okay, but then why would I ever actually use the Lucine provider? Because this looks better. Well, there are a few things that are worth considering, regardless if you're a small or a big web shop. One of them is deployment cost. Because Elasticsearch needs an active server somewhere, be that on-premise or in Elastic Cloud, it will incur a cost of hosting that instance, a recurring cost of hosting that instance. So if, for example, if you're a very small shop, that cost might not actually be worth for you. Another point worth mentioning is latency. Because Elasticsearch is its own server, there is a inherent latency to every single request sent between your web shop and between Elasticsearch. Now, this is generally not a big deal in modern technologies, but it can be just that tiny amount of time that makes it worth or not worth using the Elasticsearch provider. And the third one, obviously, complexity. So, like I said before, we try to make it as simple as possible, but you do need a developer for a brief amount of time to configure, firstly, the actual server, the search server, and secondly, Ucommerce to connect to it. So there are definitely many web shops that might actually see the Lucine provider as the better option. Now to hop into the last bit, which is some of the features that I thought highlighting. And obviously, I'm not going to go through all of the features that we have, just some that I thought were worth mentioning. And let's start with the obvious one. All the built-in search capabilities that you are used to from version 9, or some of them even from prior, full text search, fuzzy search, powerful faceted search, and suggestions are all present. And again, switching between the two providers doesn't incur any kind of development on you. So you can switch between the two without you having to change your queries, the indexes, the logical indexes, and or the index definitions. Another feature that we strive for to provide out of the box was A/B toggling. And what this means is that we have implemented this so that you don't have to. And it means that by default, for example, if your web shop is dependent on imports, or at least periodic imports. So you often import data, which then needs to be indexed to Elasticsearch. During that time, obviously, the web shop needs to keep functioning. And that is what this allows us and you to have. And lastly, one of the outlying features is the raw queries. And I think this is pretty neat because Elasticsearch is very, very powerful. And it has a lot of features that we have not, perhaps yet, covered in the provider. So if you or your developers in the company have experience with Elasticsearch, or your requirements, your customer requirements need something else than what is provided out of the box, and you want to leverage some of those strong features that Elasticsearch has, we actually have an API that you can call with actual Elasticsearch queries, essentially in a way bypassing Ucommerce to do as little processing on that as possible. So you can say, okay, Ucommerce, you do your thing, but I want exactly this feature in this way. And I think that does it for me today. So I'm going to hand it back to Søren for more awesome stuff.
Thank you for that, David. There are a bunch of questions, most of them answered in text. So, but there is one that I would like to pose to you here, and there was a question about migration. So going from version 9x previous to 9.4, is there any breaking changes that the customers and developers should be aware of before operating?
So yes, there are a few actually introduced with 9.4. Most of them are related to us making the syntax better for you, easier to use, more robust. And then some of them are sort of unrelated, getting rid of some old obsolete methods finally, and providing alternatives for those. So there are a few breaking changes, but for those who want to migrate, we will have all of these changes documented in our release notes and in documentation, so that you can read through that and you can easily follow that. The changes are not major, safe to say.
Excellent, thank you, David. I can supplement David's information and tell you that we do have customers already running on 9.4 on the beta version, even because these requirements, these features were so valuable that they decided to jump the gun, and they were able to upgrade an existing 9.3 version to 9.4 without much problems. We simply handed the documentation over and they were able to complete the process on their own. So we do have running installations for this. So really good stuff. One thing that I'd like to add is that some of the changes that we made also affected the Lucine provider in a positive way. So when David showed you the indexing speeds showing Lucine, significantly slower in indexing than Elastic, I can tell you that it's still faster than the previous implementation of Lucine. In fact, we're able to optimize indexing speeds with Lucine up to 33%. So it is also worth upgrading to 9.4 if you don't intend using Elastic, because there are some nice benefits in there in addition to the refinements in the bold syntax as well. But that's all detailed in the release notes, so check them out if you're interested in the itty-bitty details. That is scalability. It is the first time that we can introduce enterprise-level scalability with Ucommerce. It is the first time that we can sort of democratize a feature that's rarely found in a platform like for the mid-market like Ucommerce. So I think you're really gonna get some bang for the buck out of this one. In addition, Elasticsearch is an awesome search engine. So you get some additional nice full-text search queries. And it's worth mentioning the unified API that covers everything from full-text search, facets, standard queries. It's all the same thing. And of course, you don't have to use it if you don't want to. Opt-in complexity means that you can go with a simple provider for scenarios where you do not need scalability and all that. And then later on, you can switch over and use the advanced features of Elasticsearch. So thank you very much to David and to the rest of the team for this. There's been a lot of investment made into the platform to enable this for you. And we can't wait to get it into your hands so you can try it out and see how awesome it is.